We are all so busy these days, and we're always looking for helpful tips and advice on how to find a better work-life balance. We all have to earn a living and pay the bills, but are you doing enough to look after yourself and your health at the same time? Now, many of us prioritise careers and work, and we're slaving over our computers and mobiles all the time. But does this make you cut corners on your diet, exercise or sleep? I'm Dr. Ben Sinclair, and welcome to Health versus Wealth with Dr. Ben. Our guests share their life experiences and we discuss their challenges in their health and their wealth. I hope their experiences will help you with your life and health. I'm delighted to welcome one of the true pillars of the West Midlands community, a talented musician, manager and record label owner, indeed a trailblazer in the music industry for 20 years, selling 15 million records. Today, he's a highly respected campaigner and advocate for growing businesses. He runs his own flourishing publishing and events company, and he gives a huge amount back. Ninder Johal, welcome.
Thank you for the invite, sir.
Thank you so much for coming. Now, you're a distinguished entrepreneur. Did entrepreneurship run in your family?
So I was born in Birmingham, and my parents came from the northwest of India, Punjab. And that's when, of course, in this country there was a labour shortage, so they needed immigration. So my parents came along to sort of fulfil that labour shortage. And when I say labour shortage, so they worked in factories and foundries. So my father worked in a classic black country foundry, and my mother worked for those who were into their cycles, the relay bikes that they used to manufacture. I don't know where they've gone now. So she was an assembly worker. So basically it was very much a working class industrial background. So there was absolutely no indication, no hint, and neither did my parents' entrepreneurs. So there was no hint of an entrepreneurial background or indeed a business background for me to look to, aspire to, or get involved in, or be influenced by.
Now, I gather your parents wanted you to get a proper professional job. So what did you study and how did that work out for you?
So my father, he got injured badly, and health and safety wasn't great in black country foundries, but we're going back into the 60s, 70s. So what he didn't want, most people of his age, of that generation, didn't want their children to end up working in an industrial environment. So really, they really pushed the need to get educated, and education was key, and ideally a profession was key. So that's what forced me down that route. Interestingly, though, I didn't know what profession I wanted to follow. So the only thing I did realise that people who wore suits seemed to earn good money, seemed to have respect. So I thought, well, the best thing probably, and I don't wear a suit now, can you believe it? But I thought, well, it's got to be a profession with a suit. So I've got to concede, I did my A-levels. I still was pretty clueless what I really wanted to do. But the suit came back in. I thought, who wears suits? So I thought, well, accountants wear suits. So I then did an accountancy and finance degree. Unfortunately, or even though I got a good degree, I had about 18 interviews.
Wow.
Between July and August. That's a lot of interviews.
That is.
A lot of interviews. But I flunked them all. Flunked every single interview. Now, either I didn't fit or what I said was pure garbage. But what it meant was I didn't have a job. So, and I'm now showing my age. So then I thought, well, what do I do? September, panic. I knew I needed to do something. So I thought I'll do something. Somebody said, do an MBA. It's called a Masters of Business Administration.
Okay.
And to show my age, I picked up a copy of Yellow Pages, flicked through what was the nearest university, which was Aston University, rang up, and I said, I'd like to do boom, boom, boom. So that's when the MBA came in. The MBA was great. Aston University was great business school. I then got myself a job in corporate, and this meant I was part of a team that would go around the country trying to understand failing businesses. So we would go in, we'd look at their books, we'd see where the cash was hemorrhaging, and then we'd try and see if we could sort that out. And some of the things which is really interesting about human beings. So we were taught to look for the following things. So you'd go into a business, failing business, cash flow, going through the floor. The first thing we'd do is we'd walk into the car park.
Okay.
And the car park, you would try to understand the way cars were parked. So example, if you had a lot of car parking reserved places for management, that told you what the culture was like. Those were important. We got our own. We also then had to look at the nature of the cars. So most of the sales reps in the place had top-of-the-range BMWs. That told us the status that was applied to certain jobs. We would then, when you walk into reception, you would look at the carpet, you look at the walls, see what pictures were around. That again then gave you an idea of the culture, because that's where any business starts or fails, is at its culture. And so then we'd look at the books. Now, interesting, you'd expect accountants to look at the books first. We did, but all those telltale signs used to give us. And invariably what used to happen, we used to find a couple of things. Invariably people got comfortable in their workplace and then would build an empire around them. So big departments. So the bigger the department, the more important they would feel. And the bigger the environment around them, the more important they felt within the overall company structure. So our job was to try and reduce that. So we weren't popular people.
No.
We were hatchet people. But whilst I was doing this, of course, I started to pursue my love of music. And that's where the two came to clash.
Now, I can hear in your voice, you obviously have a love of music. That was your first love. Were your parents disappointed when you went into music? And where did your love of Bhangra music stem from?
Okay, so my love of music started when I was about 10 or 11. I used to go to the local temple and just play a tabla. It's a percussion instrument. So I would play there, on a Sunday morning, whatever it is. And so that was always in the background. When I was at university, we had to organise our own event. But the stipulation was that you, the person on the MBA, had to be part of the act, whatever it was. Now, I knew I could play tabla, so I managed to rustle a few friends together and say, right, we're going to put a band together. We're all going to play, but there's one stipulation. They said, what's that? I said, I have to be in the band.
Okay.
So I said, you either take me on or you don't. So anyway, we did it, and I thought, this is quite good fun. And at the same time, the Bhangra explosion was happening. In other words, that's the fusion of Punjabi beats, Western beats, and Western lyrics and melodies that was sort of exploding now. So I was in the right place at the right time. Anyway, that little thing went well at the MBA, and we said, well, let's just set up a band. So we set the band up, and we then started recording. And as the record got finished, the record did well. And suddenly we were gigging everywhere. So we're doing shows at night, 2 o'clock in the morning in nightclubs. I'm then getting in the car, racing either home or racing up to the country to where I was working as that consultant.
So you were still doing the consultant job?
Still doing consultant whilst playing in the band. And when you're trying to do two things at the same time, at the opposite ends of the spectrum, so daytime, evening, and the side hustle was getting tiring. And of course, you can manage on 2 hours sleep.
You can,
yeah. But it's difficult. And I think what you can't hide, whilst mentally you might be just there, but the physical signs, in other words, the bloodshot eyes, and those you can't hide. So the manager called me in and said, look, I'm reading this stuff about you doing gigs and in papers and things. I think you're going to have to make a choice here. So I then did the unthinkable, nice consultancy role, and I said, something, I'm off.
Wow.
So at that point, I loved the music I was doing, so I thought I'll formalise it by setting up a label.
Okay.
And what the label would do is my band would be its first artist. I would then sign other artists. Came home and told my dad and my mum what I was doing. So there's a couple of problems. First problem is, hold on, you got a degree in finance, you got an MBA, you secured a great consultancy role, and you're dropping that to do what?
Exactly.
To do what? So I'm saying, well, I'm going to be selling albums. Sorry, what's an album? It's a record. What's a record? What? And we used to have music cassettes then. So that's a music cassette, and that's a vinyl. They're trying to explain the process of getting someone's vocal music onto that and then to license it and sell it. Was a bit of a difficult thing to explain.
So to sell that to your folks was hard?
It was hard because remember, they used to work in foundries. So they don't understand the whole... And so they said, oh, okay, so basically you're a musician then, full stop. No, I run a record company, that's a business. Difficult to translate. Because all he saw in his mind was, and I'll take you back to Trotter, the little... What were the robins that the drive around, you open the door and all these tapes fall out. So he saw me really basically as a trader. And that's something he didn't want me to see. But
Did he come round to seeing you as
unfortunately
the band manager and chief businessman?
Unfortunately, he died before we had the global success with 15 million copies, which is a shame. But my mother never quite still worked it out. She saw the newspaper headlines, but she still couldn't understand what I was doing. And I think for all intents and purposes, I was just a musician.
But your role had extended not just as a musician, much more into managing the band and then the label. That must have taught you a lot of different skills.
So interesting, the MBA was more corporate. So in other words, it's more high level, stakeholder engagement, culture. And I couldn't quite work out what those things meant. But when I was managing the band before I went full-time with the business, I was negotiating with promoters. So these guys making sure they pay us. Also, incidentally, I was the oldest, so I was 24, but everybody else in the band were in 18 or 19. So managing the culture of 18, 19-year-olds, great talent, but also channeling the talent in the right way so that when you go on stage, you're not doing your own thing, you're playing as a team. Also making sure that we're on track in terms of getting to gigs on time, getting to rehearsals on time, getting the recording at the same, because we were recording at the same time while we were performing. So it's multitasking, multi-projects, managing a team, negotiating with promoters, negotiating with agents, negotiating with private parties where we were booked, then making sure that all of that comes together. And what you don't realise, because you do it naturally, because it has to happen, actually you're picking up a lot of leadership skills and a lot of negotiation skills and all those business traits that you need. So it was a very interesting time, and that's where the degree was great. But actually, that's where I learned my leadership and business skills and negotiating and understanding people.
Now, in case you joined us late, my guest today is Ninder Johal. He's a trailblazer in publishing and events. You launched your own record label. Tell us about the success that you had. You went global.
Yeah, so what was interesting was, so the music that we were publishing or playing was a mix of Punjabi and Western put together. So it was a fusion. So when I quit my job, which my parents weren't happy about, I was driven by a dream really, and the drive was that I love the music that I'm playing, but one day this could cross into the charts. Now, nobody, including my parents and my wife, by the way, believed that was achievable.
That's a lonely place to be.
It's a lonely place to be. Because what you can remember is you're trying to sell a music that you don't understand the lyrics, you don't understand the melody, and it's a strange sound you're not familiar with. And then you've got this chap like me, a British Sikh, wandering around with a rucksack full of CDs, trying to say, please, license these deals. Now, it took me 12 years to persuade anybody that this was serious music. And now 12 years is a long time.
That is dedication.
And I remember every time I'd go abroad with these CDs with me, I'd ring home to say, I've just landed at the airport, just to let you know I'm fine. I remember on the 10th year, my wife said to me, this dream you've got, I think you ought to abandon it.
Oh, wow.
I don't think it's going to happen. Just accept that the music is only listenable to Asian kids, and to the Western ear, it's not going to happen. Just knock it on the head. And of course, my parents are still reminding me, what have you done? What have you done? But something, I say this to everyone, entrepreneurs, anybody and everybody, you make your own luck. Persistence is key, and having a dream is key. Where are you trying to get to? And of course, having the ability to ignore the naysayers who say, look, this is just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But anyway, I'll cut the long story short. We managed to convince a small label in Germany to take it. So they signed it. This was in France, sorry, Cannes. Then I met another label in Germany, who's a Turkish company, who said, oh, we heard you've signed to, yeah, hardly give me any money. They said, can we? I said, yeah, off you go. Luck, this is where the luck bit comes in. The record started to do really well. The record started to do really well in Istanbul. And here's the luck. The DJs in Istanbul took it to Berlin and Munich.
Okay.
And that's when the phone call came from Universal Records. They said, we want the record. We don't understand it, don't know what the music is, don't know what the lyrics are, but we want it. That's when I knew we were on our way. So from starting my own band, Achanak, signing lots of people onto my label. Suddenly we had a track that could cross the charts, and that dream might become a reality. Then, just accelerate, it started to pick up, and then it got picked up by Sony in the UK. Universal came on board. The Americans came on board and said, there's a certain chap called Jay-Z. He wants to rap on the record. We think that would be useful. We did the deal. We broke America at number 7. We broke the UK chart at number 5. We had 9 number 1s.
Wow.
It was the biggest ringtone in Japan. We were now signing what we call film rights for the song to be placed, and we sold 15 million copies, including a number 2 in Germany, and it was the biggest track of that year in the dance charts.
Wow, that is
and
incredible.
It all started from a little dream when I was at work, and I thought, do you know something? This could happen.
Wow, that
and I still remember, the day. It was a Wednesday. This was the last days of something called Top of the Pops.
I remember Top of the Pops. Yeah,
I remember putting the TV on. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, straight in number 5. The first time a Punjabi track has broken into the charts.
Wow.
I'd fulfilled my dream. And
That's
that was
amazing.
something I'll never forget.
Wow, I mean, that determination shows through. You know, you hung on even though your parents were sort of doubting this, your wife doubted it. You kept going with that steely determination, and look at what happened.
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes you now think in hindsight, well, crikey, everybody was right. Well, I should have. I mean, most people think I should have been in a mental institution because the prospect of doing that unthinkable. And of course, what helped me was I loved the music anyway, and I think if you've got that hook, you can go back to it and back to it and back to it, and that's what kept me going.
I think you'd taken from your management training days that culture eats strategy for breakfast because you were creating a culture.
Yeah.
But you had to make it fun, and I gather you had someone as young as 10 years old in your band. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so we were doing well as a band, and my son grew up in a music environment. So from the age of 2, he'd be coming into the studios with us, he'd be going to rehearsals. He'd actually started coming to the gigs with us. He'd buy a plastic guitar and start strumming along. But what was interesting was, from the age of 6, and we still don't know what it was, but he suffered severely from eczema, really severely. And to sort of distract him, we said, well, why don't you learn to play an instrument? So we gave him an instrument called the Dole. And we just gave him just to try to keep him happy. But he picked it up very quick, and obviously been learning on the road with us without realising. And at school, suddenly, this kid who was ostracised because he looked different because of the eczema, and he could suddenly play this instrument, and suddenly became very popular at school. And I think that drove the sort of hidden musical traits came out, and he picked up the instrument really quickly, so quickly that we said, actually, you could probably come on stage. And his first gig was in Hastings, but his second gig was in Germany, Cologne, and in the audience was the Pope.
Wow, so he was 10. Was he 10 when he was doing that?
Yeah, he was 10. But
his health was turned around by using his music.
His music, because it built his self-esteem. He felt he had something that he could show other people he could do that other people couldn't do in the class. And so from a health perspective, it's interesting, the correlation between stress, health and well-being, and actually the role of music in all of those little segments. And
it's therapeutic, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course he's now, he produces his own albums, he still plays with the band, but so yeah, that's where the health comes in. So it's interesting. Now,
cast your mind back to your health. You were working punishing hours, you were in the studio, you were on stage. What kind of hours were you keeping?
Okay, so if I go to the early stage, when I was at work, those were punishing. So we'd be finishing a gig at about 2, getting all the stuff in the van, 3, out, back to either home or the hotel if I was working. At 6, get up for 7, into work. So it's about an hour. And then, of course, when I went main full-time, we were still doing punishing hours, but this time it was studios and recordings. 2 things then, I would say the sleeping patterns are totally irregular. So you'd be coming home for 4, maybe waking up at 9 or 10. Eating habits were definitely irregular. You were eating snacks in the studio, you were eating snacks while on the road. I remember in the early days when we were trying to sign a record deal, we were going to see lots of record companies, and we were eating a lot of junk food.
Not a good way to keep you healthy.
No, and you know, I remember one particular weekend, I was just sitting on the sofa and I crashed out. And a couple of members of the band there, and one of them still enjoys the fact that he had to slap me to wake me up, and he still enjoys that, telling me that. But you know, it put me off junk food for a good decade. I couldn't touch it.
You'd have an overdose of it, had you?
Yeah, I'd had so much of it. You see this problem where you eat too much of something.
You are what you eat.
Yeah. And I remember we were struggling to stay in weight, so we started taking football with us. So we'd play before a gig just to try and stay active. Yeah, try and stay active. But you were on the road, so the very thing: poor diet, poor sleeping patterns, and going from just show to show, and then intermittently into studios, wrong hours. But of course, when you're in your mid-20s, you think you can do anything. You think anything and everything is possible. What you don't think at that time, so I think education comes in, is that what you do in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s will impact you in your 50s and your 60s. But nobody tells you that.
It's quite
a bit
scary,
like pension.
that.
It's a bit like pension planning. Nobody thinks of pension planning 20, 30, 40 till they're 50.
And we have to get those good habits in early. And I mean, as a globe-trotting record label manager, you must have learned some life skills and business skills that might have proved useful later.
Well, what was interesting in touring is when you tour abroad, you're basically meeting people that don't look like you, they don't dress like you, and they don't speak like you. So you develop an understanding of other people's cultures. And I think that makes you much more amenable talking to people that are different to you, that speak differently. So I think a lot of the skills in terms of dealing with people, having patience, improving your communication skills, somebody who's different from you, speaks differently, you can communicate properly. I think my son, from the age of 10, learned a lot about culture, and he's a lot more of a globalist, if that makes sense. They see the world in a much more global place. That's what you find with young people. So I think if you can mix it, and many people that are different to you, I think you've got a lot to learn. And of course, from a palate perspective, if you can eat things that are quite different and healthy. And so I do take note now of what I eat. But yeah, I think one of the things I learned now is that you need to teach kids at school that whatever you eat from now will affect you later on in life. And I think to teach them to sleep, to eat properly, all of these things that we didn't do.
Ninder, you have so much interesting experience, but we're out of time and we can't fit it all in. Can I persuade you to come back next week?
Absolutely.
I would absolutely love that, because there's so much more we can learn from you. I'm sure the listeners would love that. Now, as a treat, you've brought us a Bhangra track from Archanak to play us out. So can you introduce it for us?
Yeah, it's called Ishq Bata, which is called Love is Sweet. But the track is quite lengthy, and the why it's lengthy, it's a snippets of observations. So it's not a story. It's snippets of observations, and that's why it changes pace and everything. And of course, what you're going to hear is typically the kind of performance we put on live, which is very much rhythmic driven and a fusion of Western and Eastern.
ਹੱਸਦੀ ਨੇ ਫੁੱਲ ਮੰਗਿਆ ਹੱਸਦੀ ਨੇ ਫੁੱਲ ਮੰਗਿਆ ਹੋ ਹੱਸਦੀ ਨੇ ਫੁੱਲ ਮੰਗਿਆ ਹਾਏ ਹਾਏ ਦਈਏ ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਬਾਗ ਚੋਂ ਕੱਢ ਕੇ ਹੱਸਦੀ ਨੇ ਫੁੱਲ ਮੰਗਿਆ रुक जा रेल गड्डिए ओ रुक जा रेल गड्डिए हो रुक जा रेल गड्डिए हाय हाय ओ साडे यार दा स्टेशन आया रुक जा रेल गड्डिए डिस्को च किंग वजदी हो ਵੱਜਦੀ ਹਾਏ ਹਾਏ ਅੱਜ ਭੰਗੜਾ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਡਿਸਕੋ ਚ ਕਿੰਗ ਵੱਜਦੀ ਓ ਡਿਸਕੋ ਚ ਕਿੰਗ ਵੱਜਦੀ ਹੋ ਡਿਸਕੋ ਚ ਕਿੰਗ ਵੱਜਦੀ ਹਾਏ ਹਾਏ ਅੱਜ ਭੰਗੜਾ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਡਿਸਕੋ ਚ ਕਿੰਗ ਵੱਜਦੀ ਓ ਡਿਸਕੋ ਚ ਕਿੰਗ ਵੱਜਦੀ
So that's it for today. I hope my guest and I have helped you meet some of your health versus wealth challenges. Now, to hear more from me, Dr. Ben, why not subscribe on your usual podcast platform? And if you like my advice or you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email me on podcast@drfinlays.co.uk. Anyway, I hope to see you again, but for now, it's goodbye from me, Dr. Ben.